The teacup sat on the counter, still warm. The almond cookies I'd baked the night before remained untouched on the porcelain plate, arranged just the way Thomas liked them. 7 o'clock, the exact minute he always walked through that front door, but tonight the door stayed shut. I stood there staring at it far longer than I should have, listening for the familiar jingle of his keys, the soft click of the deadbolt turning. Nothing came. Just silence, the kind that burrows into your bones when you realize something precious has been ripped away forever. My name is Vivian Carter. For 15 years, I believed I had the kind of marriage other women envied. Thomas was steady, accomplished, the sort of man who could walk into any room and immediately make it feel more grounded. He never raised his voice. He was never late. He brought me flowers every Sunday without fail, wore perfectly pressed button-downs, and made sure I never had to worry about money. We never had children. Life just seemed to flow between us like we were two puzzle pieces that had always belonged together. But what I didn't realize, what I was about to discover in the most devastating way possible, was that our puzzle had missing pieces, and one of them was hidden in a place I had never been allowed to enter. Thomas died on a Thursday. They told me it was a heart attack. I remember the doctor's face when he delivered the news, kind, rehearsed, professionally detached. Massive myocardial infarction, he said, his voice soft but clinical. He went quickly, there was no suffering. I nodded as if those words provided comfort, as if the speed of his death somehow lessened the crater it carved into my chest. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered when you've just lost the only person you believed truly knew you. The funeral passed in a blur. Black clothing, polite condolences, unfamiliar faces telling me what a wonderful man my husband had been. I clung to Claire, my best friend since our college days, who kept pressing glasses of water into my hands that I didn't drink and plates of food into my lap that I couldn't swallow. The grief felt like drowning in slow motion, every breath an effort, every moment stretching into eternity. But it wasn't until my sister Rachel arrived that something shifted inside me. Her perfume was too sweet, her embrace lasted too long. She pressed her cheek against mine and whispered, "I'm so sorry, sis." Thomas was like a brother to me. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to accept those words at face value, but something in her eyes when she pulled back, it wasn't grief. It was something else entirely, something I couldn't name but felt in my gut like a warning. Later that evening, as Rachel poured herself a generous glass of wine in my kitchen, she said casually, "Hey, I know this isn't the best timing, but Thomas loaned me some money a while back. I was hoping we could settle that now that you're, taken care of." I stared at her, confusion cutting through my haze of grief. "What money?" I asked. She blinked, then smiled as though I was being forgetful. "Oh, I guess he never mentioned it." Something inside me twisted, a knot of unease forming in my stomach. That night sleep refused to come. I drifted through our house like a ghost, touching furniture as though it might speak to me, reveal secrets hidden in the wood grain. The bookshelves, the polished hardwood floors, the framed wedding photograph that suddenly felt like it belonged to strangers. That's when I noticed them, Thomas's keys, still sitting on the hallway table where he'd left them that final morning. I picked them up, turning them over in my palm, and that's when I saw it. The key that was different from all the others, the one I had never been allowed to use, the key to his garage. I'd asked about it once years ago. "There's nothing interesting in there," he'd said with that easy smile of his. "Just tools and grease, you wouldn't like it." I hadn't pressed the issue, I never pressed. That was the nature of our marriage, easy, comfortable, and full of quiet spaces I understood I wasn't meant to enter. But now I had absolutely nothing left to lose. The next morning I drove to the garage. It was located in the old industrial district, hidden behind a row of crumbling warehouses with rusted corrugated roofs and weeds pushing through cracked asphalt. Not exactly the kind of place you'd expect a man like Thomas to store anything of value, but he came here every Thursday like clockwork, regular as the tides. I had never questioned it. The thought of questioning it had never even crossed my mind. The metal door was heavier than I anticipated. The key turned with a reluctant groan, and for a long moment I simply stood there, my hand trembling on the handle, terrified of what might be waiting on the other side. When I finally pushed it open, the smell hit me first, dust and old motor oil, the scent of a space long forgot. I fumbled for the light switch, found it, and then I froze. This wasn't a garage. There were no tools, no boxes of forgotten junk, no car parts gathering dust. What I found instead was a shrine to a life I never knew existed. I stepped inside slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The fluorescent lights flickered to life overhead, casting a pale, clinical glow over the strangest room I had ever entered. Every wall was covered, completely covered, with photographs, newspaper clippings, hand-drawn charts, and maps marked with pins and string. On one wall, dozens of printed photographs were arranged in neat rows like some kind of obsessive collage. And every single one of them featured Thomas, but not the Thomas I knew. In these pictures, he wasn't wearing his usual tailored suits or his carefully cultivated, composed expression. He looked different, relaxed, human. Worn jeans, casual shirts, hair tousled by wind. His face was softer in these images, his posture less guarded, his smile more genuine than anything I'd seen in years. And in almost every photograph, he stood beside the same woman. She was beautiful, at least 10 years younger than me, with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through the camera. They stood close in every image, too close. Her hand rested on his arm in one photo. His face was turned toward her with an expression of pure adoration in another. Beach vacations, ski lodges, candlelit dinners. The timestamps on the backs of some photos made my blood run cold. 7 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. One was dated just months before his death, August 2024. That date stopped me cold, because on that day I had been home cooking Thomas's favorite meal, waiting patiently for him to return from what he'd called a client meeting. And here was photographic evidence that he'd been somewhere else entirely, sitting beside this woman and a young man in his early 30s. The three of them were smiling like a family. On the back of that photograph, written in Thomas's unmistakable handwriting, were 2 words, Isabel and Logan, August 2024. My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of a metal desk in the center of the room to keep myself upright. That's when I noticed the papers, files stacked high, bank transfer records, corporate documents from companies I'd never heard of, letters from overseas firms, tax records that didn't match anything I knew about his financial situation. And tucked into one folder, a medical report. My eyes scanned the header, Crescent Heart Institute. The date was less than 2 months old. Thomas's full name was printed at the top, followed by a diagnosis that made my vision blur: ischemic heart disease stage 3, high risk of cardiac arrest. He had known he was dying, and instead of telling me, instead of preparing me, instead of giving us a chance to face his mortality together, he had spent his final days building this secret world with another woman, another life, another family, because that's what the young man in the photograph had to be, their son. 15 years. 15 years I had stood faithfully by his side, believed in our vows, trusted in our love. And the man I had just buried wasn't the man I'd married. He was a stranger. A stranger who had looked me in the eye 2 nights before he died, handed me a velvet box containing a sapphire necklace, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "You're the only one for me, Vivian." I staggered backward toward the door, my chest tight, my thoughts fragmenting into chaos. What was I supposed to do with this? Who was I now? A widow, certainly, but a widow of whom? That's when I heard them, footsteps, soft, hesitant, like someone trying not to be noticed. My heart slammed against my ribs as I spun around. Standing in the open doorway, silhouetted against the gray morning light, was the young man from the photograph. Same dark hair, same sharp jawline, same intense, unreadable eyes. Vivian Carter. His voice was calm, but my pulse was pounding too hard to fully absorb his words. I couldn't answer. "I thought you might find your way here eventually." He stepped inside slowly, hands raised slightly as if approaching a wounded animal. "My name is Logan Myers. Thomas Carter was my father." And just like that, the ground dissolved beneath my feet. I don't remember what I said first, maybe nothing. Maybe I just stood there gripping the edge of that desk like it was the last solid thing left in the universe. Logan moved closer, his movements careful, measured, as though he understood exactly how fragile this moment was. I stared at him, not just seeing him, but searching, looking for proof. And there it was, undeniable. His eyes were Thomas's eyes, that same penetrating gaze, that same silence that communicated more than words ever could. "You're really his son," I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Logan replied without hesitation. "And I'm sorry, I never wanted you to find out this way." "How long have you known about me?" "My whole life." There was no apology in his tone, just truth. "He didn't tell me much, only that he was married, that you didn't know about me. He kept our lives completely separate. My mother, Isabel, she respected that. She never wanted to interfere." He paused. "But after she passed away last year, things started to change." "Passed away, so now she was gone too, just like Thomas." I sank into the dusty chair near the desk. My legs simply couldn't support me anymore. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Why today?" Logan reached into his backpack and withdrew a folded document, yellowed at the edges. He extended it toward me and I hesitated before accepting it. "It's a draft of a will," he explained. "Unfinished, unofficial. My father gave it to me 2 weeks before he died. He said the official version would go to you, but this was just in case." I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. There it was, Thomas's handwriting, that same steady, elegant script that had graced countless birthday cards and dinner notes over the years. It wasn't notarized, just scrawled instructions dividing assets. Logan's name appeared, references to a company I'd never heard of, Mercury South Holdings, and one final notation: access to remaining documents secured in office vault. Code linked to personal item gifted to V. My breath caught. Personal item gifted to me. The necklace. The sapphire necklace Thomas had presented to me 2 nights before his death. That wasn't just a gift, it was a key to something much larger. Instinctively, my hand rose to my collarbone, though the necklace wasn't there. I had left it at home, tucked safely in its velvet box because it had felt too heavy to wear. Now it felt infinitely heavier. "What is Mercury South Holdings?" I asked, still scanning the document. Logan drew a deep breath. "One of his private companies. Publicly registered, not on any official records. He used it to move money internationally. After my mom died, I started investigating. I found transfers I couldn't trace, offshore accounts opened in my name that I never authorized. I think he was trying to secure something for you, for me, for all of us." My throat tightened. "Why would he do that?" "Because he knew his time was running out," Logan said quietly. "And because he didn't trust the people he worked with." I looked up sharply. "What people?" His expression darkened. He never gave me names, just warnings. He said if anything happened to him, someone would come looking for information, for leverage, for whatever he left behind. I leaned back in the chair, my mind racing. A secret company, a hidden safe, a necklace that apparently held some kind of code, and a husband who had spent 15 years constructing an elaborate double life while smiling at me across the dinner table. You're telling me there's more? I said slowly, the will, these files, the photographs, this is just the beginning. Logan nodded gravely. I believe he left things behind not just for us but to protect us. I rose slowly on unsteady legs and surveyed the room one final time. It no longer felt like a shrine to a secret love affair. It felt like evidence and a warning. I need to go home, I said, my voice stronger now. I need that necklace. Can I come with you? Logan asked, if you'll allow me. I considered his request for a long moment, then nodded, because whether I welcomed it or not, this was now our shared burden to carry. I didn't go home immediately. I needed space to process, room to breathe, so I called Claire. Within 20 minutes, I was curled up on her living room couch, hands wrapped around a mug of tea I had no intention of drinking. The sapphire necklace sat on the coffee table between us like an unexploded ordnance. Claire never pushed for explanations. She waited until I was ready, and when I finally told her everything, the garage, the photographs, Logan, the draft will, she didn't offer empty platitudes or I told you so's. She just whispered, I'm so sorry, and took my hand in hers, but I wasn't ready to cry. I wasn't prepared to collapse into grief. What I needed were answers. I needed someone to hold accountable, so I drove to Rachel's condominium. It was a sleek new development on the north side of town, underground parking, security gates, concierge service, strangely luxurious for someone who constantly complained about financial struggles. The elevator climbed and my anger rose with each passing floor. Rachel answered the door barefoot in silk pajamas, wineglass in hand, makeup immaculate. Her hair was styled as though she'd been expecting company. Well, she drawled with a smug smile, if it isn't my grieving sister. Come to inspect the widow's inheritance? Cut the performance, Rachel, we need to talk. I pushed past her into the living room where a framed photograph immediately seized my attention. It showed Rachel and Thomas together, laughing, toasting with champagne glasses. The date stamp in the corner made my stomach lurch. 5 years ago. What the hell is this? I demanded, jabbing my finger at the frame. Rachel sauntered over, taking a leisurely sip of wine. Oh, that company holiday party. You were too tired to attend, remember? Thomas insisted I accompany him. She said it like it was nothing, like sharing champagne with my husband while I stayed home was perfectly ordinary. We always had such wonderful chemistry, she added casually. I turned to face her fully. How wonderful exactly? Her smirk wavered almost imperceptibly. I know about Isabel, I said, my voice cold and steady. I know about Logan. I know about the garage, the shell company, the secret will. Know everything, so if there's more you might as well tell me now. Rachel's eyes narrowed. She walked deliberately to her liquor cart, refilled her glass and said softly, fine, you want the truth? She set the glass down and placed one hand protectively over her stomach. I'm pregnant and the baby is Thomas's. The world stopped. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't think. 10 weeks, she continued smoothly. I found out a week before he died. He knew. He promised he would take care of everything. He even told me he was planning to leave Isabel soon. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. You were still seeing him after Isabel died? Rachel offered a small, indifferent shrug. She was never meant to be permanent. I was always the one who stayed. The words hit me like physical blows. The walls, the furniture, the low hum of the refrigerator, everything faded to static. You slept with my husband, I whispered. Don't act so scandalized. Rachel's voice hardened. You had your perfect little existence, the perfect house, the perfect dinners at 7 o'clock sharp. Meanwhile, I was drowning, dead-end jobs, bills piling up, listening to Mom compare us like I was some inferior version of you. Then Thomas started reaching out, offering help, actually listening to me. She looked up, her eyes suddenly sharp as cut glass. You were his routine, Vivian. I was his escape. The slap happened before I consciously decided to raise my hand. Rachel's head snapped sideways. Her wineglass shattered against the floor. She didn't cry, didn't shout. She just smiled, slow and knowing. There she is, the real Vivian, not the perfect, polished wife, the woman who just discovered her entire life was a carefully constructed lie. I turned away, chest heaving, hands shaking. Why didn't you tell me? Because you never would have believed me, she replied. You always assumed I was jealous, and maybe I was, but this wasn't about you, Vivian. This was about me finally having something of my own. I shook my head slowly. You didn't just take something, you stole everything. She stepped closer, her expression shifting to something unreadable. Say whatever you want, but this baby growing inside me, this child is your family now, whether you accept it or not. My throat constricted. I wanted to scream, to shatter things, to somehow reverse time and prevent all of this from happening. Instead, I said quietly, I'll honor whatever Thomas left in his will, not for you, for the baby. They didn't choose to be born into this disaster. Rachel blinked, caught off guard. You mean that? I don't know what I mean anymore, I whispered, but I know I need to leave. I walked toward the door, glass crunching beneath my shoes. My fingers trembled as I grasped the handle. Vivian, Rachel called out. Did you actually love him? I didn't answer because I honestly wasn't sure anymore. I didn't return home that night. I couldn't face the house with its carefully arranged dinnerware and neatly made bed where Thomas would never sleep again. Instead, I went back to Claire's apartment, clutching the sapphire necklace so tightly it left indentations in my palm. Claire didn't ask where I'd been. She took one look at my face, opened the door wider, and said, "You need rest." But rest was impossible when every room in my mind was collapsing inward. The following morning, Logan arrived to pick me up. Claire insisted on coming. She threw her jacket over her shoulder and announced, "You're not walking into your dead husband's secret vault without backup." Thomas's office occupied a floor in a gleaming high-rise downtown. He had always dismissed it as just a satellite space whenever I asked about it. "Somewhere for private meetings," he'd explained vaguely. I had never once set foot inside, but Logan possessed a keycard that granted us access. "I'm listed as co-owner," he explained, scanning us through security. The receptionist barely glanced up from her computer. Thomas had constructed a life so perfectly compartmentalized it required no explanations. The elevator ride felt eternal. On the 14th floor, Logan guided us to a glass-walled corner office decorated in cold, modern minimalism. There was no warmth here, no photographs of me, no personal mementos, just sleek surfaces, gray walls, and a subtle cologne I didn't recognize. "There," Logan pointed to an oversized abstract painting mounted behind the desk. "The safe is behind that." I reached into my bag and retrieved the necklace. My fingers located the small clasp and twisted it counterclockwise. A soft click. A hidden compartment opened in the sapphire pendant's backing, revealing a thin metal plate no larger than a SIM card. Numbers were etched along its edge. Logan took it carefully and inserted it into a concealed keypad beside the painting. A low beep, a soft mechanical whir, the safe door swung open. Inside lay stacks of documents, a black flash drive, a small wooden box, and a silver key attached to a tag reading, "Safe Deposit Box, Federal Trust Bank." Logan pulled out the documents first, rifling through them quickly. "These are international banking contracts, transfer records, shell company registrations." His voice tightened. He wasn't just hiding money, he was moving it offshore systematically. I picked up the flash drive but didn't plug it in, not yet. Then I opened the small wooden box. Inside lay a ring, a simple gold band with a modest diamond. My heart stuttered. It wasn't mine. I turned it over and found an inscription inside the band, "And always, not Vivian, N for Isabel." "Oh God," Claire whispered beside me. Logan looked away, his jaw tight. "He bought her a ring," I said, my voice hollow. "He was going to propose, or maybe he already had." I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't summon tears, because standing there in the sterile silence of my dead husband's secret office, I finally confronted the truth I had been avoiding. He had loved her. He may have loved me too in his own fractured way, but she had received the authentic version of him, the part that smiled genuinely in photographs, that planned vacations, that laughed freely. What I had gotten was a performance, a carefully rehearsed role. The devoted husband who arrived for dinner at 7, brought flowers on Sundays, and maintained a safe full of secrets behind a locked door. Then Logan handed me a letter, neatly folded. My name was written on the front in Thomas's handwriting. I unfolded it with trembling hands. "Vivian, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry. I never possessed the courage to tell you the truth, to speak aloud what I should have confessed years ago. I was selfish. I constructed 2 separate lives because I couldn't bring myself to abandon either one, and ultimately that cowardice cost me everything. I loved you. I understand those words ring hollow now. Perhaps they always did, but I loved you in the only way I knew how. I wanted you to have peace, to feel safe. That's why I left you these documents, this access, this truth. Use them however you see fit, burn them, bury them, expose everything. The choice is yours now. Forgive me if you can. If you can't, I understand." Thomas, I stared at the page until the words dissolved into blur. Then I passed it to Claire. She read it silently and handed it to Logan. He absorbed it without comment. None of us spoke. What was there to say? The man we had each believed we knew had shattered like fragile glass. All we could do now was decide what to do with the jagged pieces. We departed the office building in complete silence, not the peaceful silence of understanding, but the hollow silence of devastation. Claire drove while Logan sat beside me in the backseat. I watched Charleston scroll past the window, autumn colors blending into a wash of gray. My dead husband had maintained an entire existence I had never touched. Now we held the scattered fragments of that life in our hands, uncertain who else might be watching. That night, as I attempted to sleep on Claire's pull-out couch, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Vivian Carter," a man's voice, smooth and controlled. "Yes, this is Gordon Blake. I was a business associate of your husband's." My blood ran cold. "I believe you've come into possession of something that belongs to me." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," he replied, his tone still eerily calm. "The documents from the safe, some of them concern international transactions, accounts I helped establish. I strongly suggest we meet." "I'm not meeting anyone." "You will," he said, "because the other individuals Thomas worked with aren't as civil as I am. They don't make polite requests." The line went dead. I lay awake staring at the ceiling for hours, my heart racing. When morning finally arrived, I told Logan about the call. His expression hardened as he paced the room. "He contacted me as well," Logan admitted, "but there's more." He handed me a slip of paper. "Victor Crane. He claims to be the original source of the funds Thomas moved internationally. He said if we don't return everything by week's end, there will be serious consequences." I didn't ask him to elaborate on what that meant. I didn't need to. Logan retrieved the silver key from his pocket. We still haven't opened the safe deposit box. Whatever's inside might explain who legitimately owns what. Do we actually want to open another box? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. What if it only makes everything worse? Claire settled beside me on the couch. Then at least you'll know the not knowing that's what's destroying you. She was right. We formulated a plan. First, the bank. Then, if answers still eluded us, we would locate someone who could illuminate the truth. Thomas must have had a contingency, a trusted contact, someone who understood exactly what he had been involved in. That's when Logan mentioned something his mother had once told him. Edward Holloway, Dad's old college friend, my mom said he was the only person who ever told Thomas the truth, even when Thomas didn't want to hear it. Do you know where to find him? I think so. Mom kept his address in her emergency contacts. Savannah. We drove 2 hours of rain-streaked windshield and heavy silence. Savannah welcomed us with ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss and air thick with humidity, the kind of stillness that seems to belong only to old southern towns steeped in history. Edward lived in a tall brick townhouse covered in climbing ivy like something extracted from a forgotten Gothic novel. He opened the door slowly, unsurprised. "You're Vivian," he said without preamble, "and you must be Logan. You were expecting us." He nodded solemnly. "Thomas told me if everything falls apart, they'll eventually find their way to you." He stepped aside. "Please come in." Inside, his home smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. Bookshelves lined every wall. A grand piano occupied one corner, polished but clearly untouched. He motioned for us to sit, then disappeared into another room. When he returned, he carried a sealed envelope. "He left this with me," Edward explained, with explicit instructions that it only be opened if both of you appeared together. I exchanged a glance with Logan. He nodded. I broke the seal. Inside was a brief handwritten note and a second will, this one different from anything we had seen before. It specifically named the child Rachel was carrying. It designated 25% of Thomas's private offshore savings to that child to be held in trust until they reached 21. The blood drained from my face. He had planned for everything, even this. I realized then that we were standing at the epicenter of a storm Thomas had methodically constructed, brick by brick over decades, and now it fell to us to survive what he had left behind. I examined the second will again, specifically the language identifying the beneficiary as unborn child of Rachel Carter, 25% to be held in trust until age 21. It wasn't the money that shocked me. It was the surgical precision of the planning. Thomas had anticipated every variable, including his own death. Why would he name the child but not Rachel directly? I asked Edward. Because he trusted the child, Edward replied gently, not the mother. Logan shifted in his chair. This changes the entire situation. Legally, Rachel can't access those funds. I studied the document again, and if she tries to contest it, Edward nodded toward the flash drive, then you use that. Based on what Thomas shared with me, it contains comprehensive records of every transfer, every business partner, every illegal transaction they committed building this enterprise. If they push you, push back harder. Claire exhaled slowly beside me. You have leverage now, real leverage. For the first time since Thomas's death, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the naive wife who had been lied to, betrayed, and abandoned with broken pieces of a life she never understood. I felt like the only person left holding the complete blueprint, and that represented genuine power. Vivian, Logan said, leaning forward, I think it's time we stop playing defense. We need to act before Gordon or Crane does. I nodded slowly. We go to the bank. Federal Trust occupied an unassuming building wedged between a law firm and a historic preservation office, the kind of place you might pass 100 times without ever noticing, until it mattered. Claire remained in the car. Text me if anything seems wrong, she instructed. And if they refuse to cooperate, cry. Nobody refuses a grieving widow crying in a bank lobby. The vault manager examined the silver key, verified my identification, and raised an eyebrow. This box hasn't been accessed in years. It was registered under a corporate entity, Mercury South Holdings. He escorted us through multiple security checkpoints, descending into the basement. The air grew progressively colder, the silence thicker. Finally, we stood alone before the safe deposit box. He provided protective gloves. Standard protocol, you'll have complete privacy. The heavy door closed behind us. My fingers hovered over the lock. Ready? Logan asked, not even close. I turned the key anyway. The box slid open. Inside lay no bundles of cash, no false passports, no stacks of untraceable currency, just a manila folder and a single photograph. The photograph showed Thomas, Logan, and Gordon Blake standing in front of a black SUV, arms crossed, laughing like old friends, and behind them, clearly visible, stood Victor Crane. I studied the image for a long time. They weren't merely business acquaintances, I said quietly. They were partners, collaborators. Logan opened the manila folder. It contained dozens of signed agreements, shell company registrations, evidence of payoffs, and one document marked in bold red letters, Crane Blackmail Insurance. This wasn't just leverage, it was a loaded weapon. Thomas kept proof of everything, I whispered, and in that moment I finally understood. He hadn't merely left me a catastrophic mess to untangle, he had left me a weapon. Now I had to decide who deserved to face its consequences. We drove directly from the bank to Marcus Doyle's law office. He had handled my father's estate years earlier, a straightforward man, impeccably discreet with zero tolerance for unnecessary drama. I told him almost everything, not the affair, not Rachel's pregnancy, just the legally relevant details, the documents, the threats, the offshore accounts. He listened without visible reaction. Do you want to pursue criminal charges? No, I said firmly. I want insurance. He nodded approvingly. Then we'll create digital and physical copies of everything. Backups stored in 3 separate locations, one here, one with you, and one with someone who has no connection to this situation. I know exactly the right person, Claire volunteered grimly. We spent hours methodically scanning files. Thomas's record-keeping was meticulous: names, dates, wire transfer logs, fraudulent invoices. This wasn't merely questionable business practice. It constituted international criminal enterprise. And with Thomas deceased, his former partners assumed the evidence had vanished with him. They were catastrophically wrong. By evening, Marcus had drafted a formal letter outlining our position. I added one line at the bottom in my own handwriting: try me. VC, we sent it to Gordon Blake's office via courier. He called within 15 minutes. You think you're clever, he hissed. You're in over your head. No, I replied calmly. You are, because my next call goes to the IRS. After that, Interpol, a pause, then cold laughter. Fine, what do you want? Nothing. I want you to stop. No more calls, no threats, no surveillance. You touch me or anyone I care about and the complete file goes public. Every document, every signature. You don't want that kind of trouble. I already have that kind of trouble, I replied. The difference is I'm no longer afraid of it. He disconnected. 2 hours later, Victor Crane called. His approach was different, smooth, polished, the voice of someone accustomed to charming his way through any obstacle. Vivian, he said warmly, as though we were longtime acquaintances. I understand you've made some interesting discoveries. I believe we've started off on the wrong foot. There is no foot, I responded flatly, just your signature on a dozen illegal wire transfers. He laughed softly, all purely hypothetical, of course. I let the silence stretch uncomfortably. Then I said, I understand you believe you can manage this situation, but here's what you need to understand, Mr. Crane. I have no professional reputation to protect, no company to shield, nothing remains of the life I once knew, and that makes me extraordinarily dangerous. That silenced him completely. I ended the call. That evening, Logan and I sat together on Claire's back porch. The flash drive rested in his jacket pocket. A backup copy of the folder was buried in the planter box behind us. Paranoid perhaps, but when you've been systematically deceived by the person you trusted most in the world, paranoia begins to feel like basic survival instinct. I never knew he was capable of all this, Logan said quietly. My mom always described him as complicated, but I assumed she meant emotionally conflicted, not criminally corrupt. He was both, I said, and probably more besides. I gazed up at the stars, cold and distant and utterly indifferent to human suffering. There's one thing we still haven't opened, I said. Logan frowned. What? The flash drive, the video file. The flash drive had sat unopened for 2 agonizing days. I needed time to steel myself for whatever revelation remained. When I finally gathered enough courage, Logan sat beside me on Claire's couch. Claire brought tea that nobody drank. The room fell silent as I plugged in the device. A single folder appeared, labeled for Vivian. Inside, one video file dated 10 days before Thomas's death. My fingers hovered, trembling, then I clicked. The screen flickered to life. Thomas appeared, but not the polished, composed Thomas I had known. This Thomas looked hollow. His eyes were exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, his face bearing the weight of sleepless weeks. He leaned toward the camera. Vivian, if you're watching this, it means I didn't make it, or maybe I simply ran out of time. He sighed heavily and rubbed his face. There's no painless way to say this, so I'll just say it directly. You were never the person I needed to hide things from. You were the person I wanted to protect, but I waited too long, and now everything is collapsing around me. He paused, his expression intensifying. There's someone you must be extremely careful with, someone you trust far more than you should. My heart stopped. He looked directly into the camera lens. It's Rachel. The room went absolutely still. She wasn't just someone I made a mistake with. It wasn't that simple. She orchestrated this from the very beginning. The pregnancy wasn't accidental. The night I told her I couldn't continue the affair, something in her changed. She threatened that if I left her, she would expose everything, the money, the shell accounts, every secret I'd buried to keep you safe. His voice lowered, becoming almost a whisper. I believe she killed Isabel. My throat closed completely. I can't prove it, Thomas continued, his voice trembling, but the timing was impossibly convenient. Isabel had just packed her bags. She'd told me she'd booked a one-way flight to Lisbon. She was leaving everything behind. Then the car accident, single vehicle, no witnesses, brake failure, the investigators concluded, but she'd had the car serviced the previous day. His eyes glistened with barely contained emotion. Rachel knew she was pregnant. Isabel didn't. That's what changed everything. Claire gasped audibly beside me. Logan's fists clenched white. I tried to make things right, Thomas continued. I restructured the finances, created multiple backups, ensured that if anything happened to me, you would have the power to protect yourself. His voice cracked. I'm sorry it required this much destruction before I finally attempted to do the right thing. He looked away briefly, composing himself. I was weak, but you're not. If you want to walk away from all of this, do it. Take what's rightfully yours and never look back, but if you choose to fight, don't do it alone. The screen froze momentarily, then cut to black. I sat motionless for what felt like hours. He had known, he had understood exactly what Rachel was capable of. He had seen what was coming, and still he had tried to control the narrative from beyond the grave, perhaps from guilt, perhaps from fear. But now he had handed me the complete truth, and I needed to decide what to do with it. Rachel had no idea I'd seen the video when I called to invite her for brunch. She didn't suspect anything when I embraced her at the door and said how much I'd missed her, how we should reconnect as real sisters. She smiled like a woman who believed she'd already won. She wore a pale blue maternity dress that accentuated her growing belly. "The baby kicks whenever I drink orange juice," she said, laughing as she patted her stomach. I smiled back, but my eyes remained cold. We settled on Claire's sun porch. Logan stayed hidden inside. Claire poured sweet tea and tactfully disappeared. "I'm relieved you reached out," Rachel said, folding her manicured hands in her lap. "I was worried you were still angry." "Why would I be angry?" I asked, my voice deceptively mild. "Because my husband was sleeping with my sister, or because he included you in his will?" Rachel flinched, the first visible crack in her composure. She shifted uncomfortably. "Vivian. This is difficult for both of us." Thomas was conflicted, torn between obligations, "but he genuinely loved you." "No," I interrupted quietly. "He didn't love me, he pitied me." Rachel recoiled. I leaned forward. "And he feared you." Her mask slipped entirely. I placed the flash drive on the table between us. Rachel's lips parted slightly in recognition. "I know about the accounts, I know about the manipulation, I know he was planning to leave you permanently." I paused. "And I know what happened to Isabel." She didn't flinch, didn't move, just said flatly, "You can't prove any of that." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "I can't prove it, but I don't need to." She frowned, confused. I rose to my feet. "Because I'm not going to court, I'm not pressing charges, I'm not wasting years navigating some inadequate justice system to resolve this." I looked her directly in the eyes. "I'm going to walk away. And I'm going to leave you here alone with everything you thought you wanted, the money, the child, the lies, all of it." Rachel stood as well, her composure fracturing. "You think that frightens me?" "No," I said calmly, "but eventually it will." I turned and walked back inside where Logan was waiting. That afternoon, I met with Marcus Doyle one final time. I handed him the flash drive, a signed affidavit, and a single instruction. "If anything happens to me, anything at all, this goes directly to every major news outlet, every single file." Then I returned to the house I had shared with Thomas for 15 years. It was quiet now, emptied of meaning. I walked through each room slowly, my fingers trailing across chair backs and door frames and the cracks in the floorboards we had always meant to repair. I opened our bedroom closet, packed one suitcase. Left everything else behind. When I reached the garage, his garage, I locked the door behind me, not because I had anything left to hide, but because I was never coming back. 1 week later, I boarded a flight to Colorado. Fresh mountain air, a new name on the lease, a small cottage nestled against the Rockies, no secrets, no hidden safes, no more elaborate pretenses, just me, Vivian Carter, widow, survivor. Not the woman who had been deceived and betrayed, but the woman who had transformed silence into strength.